Welcome to the Breakthrough Ideas and Training webinar series. My name is Evan Hackle and I'm your host. I'm also chairman of Tortal Training. I'm happy to have with me today Rick Cram. Rick is a professional speaker and a communication consultant. Rick has given over 1,000 presentations in his career. His expertise is engaging his audience and ensuring key messages get delivered. He has a very innovative style. His talk today is on innovations in training, which is one of our 7 sub-series. Rick, welcome to the show, and please tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Hi, Evan. Thank you so much. Great to be here with you and all of you who are listening and watching in. It's great to be here with you to talk about innovation in training. It's one of my favorite topics. And in terms of about myself, over the past 30 plus years, I've worked with companies ranging from ESPN to Fidelity Investments, Scotiabank to Dunkin' Donuts, companies across North America, and helping them do one of 2 things in particular. Help them better brand themselves and do customer engagement. And as you said, I've put together, had the opportunity to lead about 1,000 speaking programs where I'm speaking, hosting, or facilitating employee engagement programs. And that includes companies ranging from pharmaceutical firms like Chiron Corporation and many others throughout the U.S. and North America.
So Rick, what's the thing that makes you different? What do you do that's sort of unique?
Well, besides my 2 proprietary programs, Plan to Be Your Best as You Lead the Change, which are leadership strategies, and the 7 C's of Compelling Communication, which are communication strategies, my whole approach, and this really comes from my background as both a marketing and branding executive consultant as well as a speaker, the convergence of the 2 mean that when I'm training, I take a very communicator's approach to training and thinking of it as an exercise that is experiential marketing in effect. Knowing that I've got to customize my message and customize how I'm going to be presenting to my audience, knowing that everyone's going to be receiving the information and the experience that they have with an emotional reaction, and engaging them to provide a deeper, more whole person experience that is simply more motivating.
Can you maybe kind of give me an example of something like that?
Absolutely. There was a company I recently gave a program to as a half-day program based on the 7 C's of Compelling Communication. It's Qubit. This is a company that's an award-winning IBM company that specializes in analytics, technology, and consulting. Most of their consultants are in their 20s, which means this millennial group are people, men and women, who are consulting mainly to people about twice their age. And they needed someone to come in and deliver a very interactive program that's motivating and equips them with communication strategies and skills to win the trust of people, again, twice their age. So what I do is end up coming in with a highly customized program focused on doing 3 things. Engaging them with what I call edutainment, and that means content, media, and experiences that have both an educational and an entertainment value to it that helps open them up, really engages them emotionally, then a learning experience that's very interactive, and then practical application of the strategies and skills that we're doing. And that ranges from people pairing up one-on-one to apply the application questions that come with every one of the strategies and skills that I teach, and it makes it very experiential. So they're actually practically applying, realistically applying what they're learning in real time. And I've found that, and my clients have found that is more motivating, and it's a better, stronger learning experience.
Sounds really interesting. And I love that kind of idea of education, what was that word you used?
Edutainment, a combination.
Edutainment.
Education and entertainment, yes.
Can you give us a little feeling of sort of how you came up with the why behind what you do?
Yeah, this really comes, well, my why is because I am passionate about helping people communicate better, be better leaders, and to see them be more successful. My clients' why they choose me is because of the results that they're able to see from the work. But really it all comes from, in terms of how I developed this approach and use some of the techniques that I do really stems from a lot of those 1,000 programs. I must admit, many hundreds of them are from my experience being a professional game show host. Occasionally, I've been on shows that are live shows for companies like Dunkin' Donuts, Scotiabank, which had me on tour, for example, doing game shows across Canada as part of a brand building program for them. But I use, after seeing the power of questions, Evan, that's what a lot of this comes down to, the power of asking questions, the way it creates interactivity and creates a shared experience, if you will. The results are just so compelling, everything from the learning experience, the practical application to it, as well as even the team building aspect that comes from these programs.
Well, and actually, that's the reason why I wanted you in this series, is because I think you do such a great job making learning and education and training fun and memorable, and that people enjoy it, and that, yeah, it's fun, but at the same time, I think they're more open and more receptive because they're engaged. And so I think what you do is really cool.
Thank you.
And there are a lot of people here listening and thinking about this, and maybe if you could just share a few tips of how people could maybe try to do, in their environment, some of the gamification that you do, things that maybe they could try to do. What would you recommend?
Perfect. Well, the first thing I would recommend is think of your audience, think of who they are, and especially when you're considering the millennials today. After doing a study recently, doing some research, seeing numerous articles on this, the millennial generation, more than any other, has a different set of values than baby boomers, for example. And one of their values is to share of themselves. They also have a great higher value than previous generations on passion. And thinking about who your audience is should be the way we all start when it comes to thinking about how and what we're going to communicate to people. And think in terms of, all right, what can I do to have them actively participating in the learning experience? Because that's going to give them what they're looking for as an experience and an opportunity to share. Truth be told, every generation responds so positively to this as well. And think in terms of sharing, if you're a trainer, for example, share your passion with the experience, being able to have the opportunity to be in front of them, but also, of course, for the content that you're delivering. That is contagious. The more you share your passion, and especially with the millennials, they're going to respond so positively. That's just one example of it.
Cool. And I know that communication is really important for you. So what are the leadership and communication strategies that you find your audiences react to the most?
Yes, there are two that come to mind right away, and I know them both because of a particular interactive exercise that we use to end every program, where I ask everyone to write down on a sticky note, what one thing do you get from this program? What one thing has really gotten underneath your skin? Then we actually have everyone put them up on the wall, and then we talk about them for a while. And there are two that stands out. One of them comes from both the Plan to Be Your Best leadership strategies, and the other is from the 7 C's of compelling strategies. And it has to do with one word: listen. There's something about the strategy of listening and then the skills of applying active listening and asking questions that people really gravitate to for I think a couple of different reasons, including that they have a sense of a couple of things. Some people don't get listened to nearly often enough, and most people are inclined and willing to listen to others. But to show them, as through my programs, there's so much goodness that comes from listening and comes from giving someone the opportunity to share themselves. There's so much information that comes out of listening, ranging from a sense of perspective, you get a sense of who your audience is, whether it's an audience of 1, of 100, or even 1,000,000. And you're really giving someone a gift when you listen. For example, I start this whole discussion in my programs on listening by asking a question: how do you want people to communicate to you? And the follow-up question to that is, how does it feel when someone listens to you? And there's something about those questions that opens people up. It sort of helps turn the corner early on in the program to getting real, to think, and this is what I meant by training that deals with the whole person, where there's a lot of emotional intelligence, but being real, that's part of what the process of galvanizing a group of people in a training environment or a motivational program. So that's the first one, listen. And the second one is based on the strategy. This specifically comes from Plan to Be Your Best, but it's the word encourage. There's a quote by Johann, I'm not sure if I'm going to have his first name correct, but it's Johann Goethe. And he had a quote that goes something like this: instruction does much, but encouragement, everything. When we encourage someone, as people have respond so well to this, they see how that's also a gift. You're actually being a leader when you're encouraging someone else. And there's a powerful service-oriented leadership strategy being applied when we do encourage others. People aren't doing that as much as they know they should. They aren't being encouraged nearly as much as they wish they were. So those two dynamics apply to both listening and the strategy of the leadership strategy of encouraging.
Well, I have to tell you, I love those two questions.
Yeah,
So how do you? I mean, just how do you like to be communicated to, and how do you feel when you're heard? But I'd like to dig deeper a little bit on the encouragement.
yes.
How do you bring that into the conversation? How do you are you encouraging them? Are the audience encouraging each other?
Very good. I'll get to that last point because they do eventually as part of my program, but we delve into it by looking at a couple of things. Who do you as a leader need to encourage, and who do you need encouragement from? And some of it even applies to you're getting into your relationships with your superior officers as well as the teams that work and report to you. As I mentioned before, there's a general sense that people aren't getting the encouragement that they need. We're all so stressed, wearing so many hats. We've got more work to do than we've ever had before. So much more is on our shoulders. And everyone is so busy thinking about what we've got to do, what we've got to do. And there isn't enough of that leadership, the strategy of encouragement being exercised coming from above or that you're sharing further down. So we get into who do you need encouragement from and ways to communicate that, how to deal with it when and this is some of that emotional intelligence, when you're not getting it, but also, and especially, how do you share it with the teams that you have working for you. We get into the practical application of this. There are a number of different questions that I have and exercises where I have people pair up or getting into groups of 3 and having them specifically encourage each other. Spend some time, generally it's just 1 or 2 minutes, where they're encouraging each other. One person takes a turn and then another, and it's a quick exercise. We talk about what it was like for them to experience that. And so that's an example of the practical application that does a number of things. It gives them the opportunity to feel what it's like to be encouraged and to encourage someone else. They see the positive things that come from it. And there's some good team building in the mix.
Well, Rick, I want to encourage you because I got to tell you something. You're giving really seriously great tips and ideas of simple things that people can do, whether it's a big audience, a small audience, whether it's just your work group, that can, I think, really impact communication and just listening to what you're doing and just discussing communication. Because so many people don't even talk about communication, and there's such dysfunction with communication. So I really love these ideas. So there's your encouragement, Rick. So thank you. Let's go on a little bit more, though, and I want you to sort of share. This conversation is about innovation, and what are you seeing in innovation that you think is especially significant?
Here's one. There are several things that I would like to comment on. I'm not sure if I'll have all the time for it, but when it comes to what we've seen over the past several years, there have been two key factors that I think have affected training and affect the innovation within training. One is the economy. There's less training going on in too many situations. There's a desire for training, especially by the younger generation, the millennials. They're hungry to learn and jumping at opportunities to learn at every chance they get for the most part. There's a wonderful cultural value there. And the training, also the lack of with the lack of funds and less of it, that I think has contributed to the high levels of disengagement with employees. We've got here in the U.S., and it does apply around the world, an engagement challenge. The number of employees that are engaged is low, and it needs to come up. Billions of dollars are lost in productivity every year because of this. And in response to all of this, one of the things a lot of companies and trainers have done, and it makes sense, it's for a good reason, is try to use technology to learn, just as we're using this online series to provide a form of consulting and training. Is very worthwhile. But here's the rub for me. A study has shown, I'm trying to remember the name of the group, but I think not only have I seen this in a study, but I'm seeing this as well. Going back to this universal truth, if you will, that nothing takes the place of being in person. The study and what I'm seeing is that people would prefer, more than anything, if they're going to be experiencing training, is to do it in a live environment. And the preference for online or any other form of e-learning and other, even including conventions and so forth, is low, much further down the list. It's been the economy that's been forcing us to look for new ways of doing training. But when it comes to innovation, I sort of want to take a counter view to say, look, we need to get back to realizing and especially take advantage of an improved economy, spend the money it's worth it to bring people together. For example, there was a company that I did a 1.5-day leadership program for. It was called the Plan to Be Your Best management meeting for iPro. It's a healthcare organization. The 55 directors of this national firm, they're one of the top quality improvement companies in the healthcare field. The 55 directors had not been together for 5 years. And so this was their first chance to come together again, and they just ate it up to be together. It was leadership training. It was a brand immersion experience. It was creating whole new levels of dynamic relationships for them that to deal with a time when they were about to go into 2014 with the Affordable Care Act in place, a completely new competitive landscape where they were fearing losing as much as 60% of their business because of this new competitive landscape. And they went on to having 100% success ratio with the strategies that we put into place. And so it was a wonderful success story, but they were so hungry to be back together again for training in person. So that's one. That's one.
Now, I certainly, our company, we do a lot of e-learning, but we work with clients and it's a blend and it's a combination. And there's certain things that really serve well with e-learning, but there's something about that personal touch and that actual physical connection that really makes a difference. So I think that's an excellent point.
Oh yes, go ahead.
No, and I do agree, and I think that like I do a ton on Skype.
Yes.
But there's nothing like that time when you're together, and a lot of times great things just happen because you're together. And when you're on Skype or you're doing email things, everything is short, everything is quick. So I think that's a good point. Bringing people together. I mean, certainly 5 years is crazy.
I do. Oh. Yeah, I do webinars as well, and I will continue to. There's a place for it. Makes sense. But there's a lot of change taking place. And just very briefly, I would say one other innovation really is about the experiential aspect of training, engaging, educating, and motivating. I used to, and I still use the term once in a while, as you heard me mention edutainment, but to have people laugh, learn, and lead. Take a 3-step approach, and there's much more of that than there was before. Certainly when I was being trained myself earlier in my career, and even 15 years ago. So it's that interactive, experiential approach is something that's more innovative, and the results show from it.
Yeah. But it's interesting when you look at Skype, because we just sort of like saying, hey, the personal, but the fact is Skype is better than a phone call.
Yes, yes.
When we were looking at this series, we were thinking maybe because it'd be technically a lot easier just doing it audio, but the ability to see people is key.
To your point, from the marketing, the branding, and marketing communications work, the most powerful media, second to being in person, is video, sight, sound, and motion, because it does evoke emotional responses, much more so than just the voice of even a webinar that's online without video. But you're right, and that's very smart, very, very smart. So I would certainly encourage you to keep on using it. That's very effective.
Cool. So as we sort of come down to the end of this webinar, what I like to ask everyone is, share just 2 or 3 nuggets, 2 or 3 things that you think could help everyone be more effective in training in their company.
Very good. The first one I've got to say, and this I might have already mentioned, is how we're all hardwired to respond to every experience coming our way, as well as everything being communicated to us. And that's that we, as human beings, have an emotional response. And then we look for information to rationalize and support that emotional response. When we think about what is that emotional response I want to evoke in someone, to spark in somebody, we're actually starting to the beginning of thinking about a better way of communicating, a better way of training. After all, we want, just like with marketing, whether it's a TV commercial, an online campaign, or an event of one kind or another, we want to create a positive emotional reaction and provide information that supports and rationalizes that and motivate people to do something, learn something new, buy a product, think of something in a different way, increase awareness and perceptions of things. The same is true. We can be more effective as trainers when we think about that. How can we customize the way we're going to communicate to our audience, and keep in mind that everyone first and foremost reacts emotionally. Ask ourselves, what is that emotional response that we want to create at the beginning when we introduce every new strategy or every technical training facet that you might be delivering, and certainly at the end. The more we think about what is that emotional response with every facet of what we're training, we're actually going to open up the doors of people's minds and hearts, which we want to do, to have them learn better and apply what we're teaching.
It really is very insightful, because so many times people just do what they do as opposed to thinking about who they're doing it with and how is that different. So I like that. I like that a lot.
The second one would be and sometimes when people ask me what I do for a living, I say I ask questions for a living, because I ask questions sometimes when I'm walking a client through a strategic branding process. I ask questions when I am engaging people in training. I'm asking questions when I'm hosting different kinds of interactive events. And questions are extremely powerful. They engage people to think about what needs to be addressed, what is the change that we want to address, what needs our attention, what is the solution. There's so many questions that we can ask and answer through a training program that promotes interactivity, invites discussion, invites practical application. And so asking questions is a wonderful tool to make any kind of training program more dynamic and more interactive.
That's great. That's great.
So there too.
Thank you. Appreciate it. One question that we want to ask you, and it really has to do with sort of an issue, I think, in corporate America, which is that training a lot of times doesn't get its due, that it's put off. It's not, we're focusing on marketing, we're focusing on sales, we're focusing on all these things, and there's not the value within the organization for training. And so we have on, listening to this, people that are primarily obviously interested in training, What advice would you give them to get more support within their organization, to get people to support and understand the return on investment that training has?
The first thing to be sure, measure it, because when measurements are really done, then it shows proof positive that the return on the investment is there in a number of ways. And everything that I've ever done when it comes to employee engagement as well as customer engagement, we don't get a chance to measure it nearly as often as we'd like, but when we do, we see tangible evidence that it was worth the investment. When I think about the idea of how training is done, I would add to this conversation one other facet, and that is doing more what I call pre-event engagement and post-event engagement opens up the opportunity to see the progress people go through and create a baseline of training, for example, or baseline of skill sets, even perspectives that people have going into training, and keeping in mind that I do leadership and communication. These are soft skills, to be sure, but when there's a pre-training engagement, then there's the training, and then post-training engagement, their evidence rises up to show that it's worthwhile. Even tracking months or even a year out and seeing how the individuals are performing, see what their levels of engagement are. Those are different ways that we can both reveal and share the ROI on training.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned that. I was working with a client, and we brought in 15 of their top performers for training.
Yeah.
And the theory that we had was we can even get more out of the best, and
Yes.
that focusing on them would make a difference. So we tracked the sales results of those 15 people for the 6 months after the training. Their sales were up 33%, and the rest of the sales force was down 8%. So there was a 41% delta between the people that we invested in training versus the people that we didn't invest in training, which of course led them to decide that they needed to start working on training with everyone.
Yes.
To help the company be successful. But when you can take some time and do those kind of measurements, it's huge. I worked with a very large restaurant chain, the same kind of thing, where we measured people that utilized their training programs versus the locations that didn't utilize their training programs, and there was like a 4% sales growth in those that did versus a 1.2% sales growth in those that didn't. And in a multi-million-dollar restaurant, an extra 3% of growth is a huge number, especially when you compound. So I think you're right. Those are the type of things that get people to see and understand. And a lot of times people in training don't think about how can I now capture and measure. So that's a really great point.
Well, those are terrific. The case studies, they don't get any better than that as proof positive that it works. And the good news is that I have seen reports, some studies showing that training and a willingness for both a willingness and an expectation that more training is going to be done by a large portion of companies, large and small, it's on the increase. So that's good.
That is good. So we're about to end up here, but we've asked every speaker to provide our audience with some kind of free offer. So we'd love to know what your free offer is and how to get it. And while you're talking and how to get it, hopefully what's happening on the screen around here is there's a little information on what people are to do to get that free offer. But anyhow, please tell us about the free offer.
Terrific. It is a free engagement review. Everything that I do is a focus on how to best engage. That's the way, the best training, that's the best, especially for leadership and communication skills and strategies to be taught and applied, is how to first engage the audience, the attendees of the program. If we can be better at how we engage, then we're going to be more successful. And so this is a free engagement review. It involves a half-hour conversation, me and you, when you either call me or email me, and we'll spend time asking questions of each other, thinking about, and I'll share with you more examples of different ways that you can engage the people that you're training. It also involves there might be one of a couple of different documents that I'll actually share with you, including the strategy questions that come out of the Plan to Be Your Best leadership program. I'll share with you the 7 communication strategies and the 7 C's of compelling communication. But it's going to be an intensive time where I'm able to roll up my sleeves and work with you on how you can better engage, what you're currently doing and what could be done better. That'll help you and your people be more successful. And so people can call me at 617-816-7017. That's my direct number. Or email me at rick@rickcram.com. Heaven help me if I ever forget that email address. rick@rickcram.com, and we'll schedule that.
It's a tremendous gift of time. And hopefully you'll be overwhelmed with requests. So I would encourage people to call first so you get on the list right away. But it's always nice to get someone else's opinion and thought. And I love the way you think about things around questions and how you think about engagement. So I think it's of high value. I want to thank everyone for being on the webinar. And I want to point something out to everyone, an offer that we have. This whole webinar series is streamed and it's free, and you're welcome to watch it and watch all of them. And I hope you enjoyed this one. But we realize that there's some people that are going to sit there and have watched this one and say, gee, I wish somebody else in my organization had seen that. Or that there'll be some speakers you're not going to get a chance to hear, or some speakers that have already gone that you've missed. So we have a special offer for you where you can buy very, very inexpensively a downloaded version of the whole series so that you can share it with your friends, you can listen to all of them. So I would encourage people to do that. And let me thank you, Rick, very much for being here. And I want to wish everyone a great day. And I hope you get to listen to as many of these interviews as possible. And take care and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Evan.
You're very welcome.